So in the afternoon we will have our topic, the dignity of work, and we invited Dr. Tibor Hay, Tibor, who was my teacher in the Sapientia. I studied Christian social principles in the economy, and his course was very exciting, and the title was very long. It was a responsible enterprise, strategic planning, business planning, and you will see what is connection with all this with the work. And what I know that he originally electric engineer, studied in Budapest, and then later he studied in the United States and got her MBA, and then in Italy, PhD in Sofia University. So he's a very knowledgeable person, but he is rather a practitioner and not a theorist. And now he runs a consulting company, and he is, what is interesting, that he is a founder of a non-profit company to provide job opportunities for handicapped people. And they currently employ more than 120 persons. So it's a quite interesting thing. How can we think about economy as in a holistic way? So please, Tibor, please start your presentation. We are very excited to see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I am very excited too, because it's such a very special event, and I'm glad that I can give you some thoughts about our topic tonight, which is the dignity of work. And I would like to go through an arc, starting with a short introduction, then speaking about business and economy in general, whether it's good or bad, how the two worlds of church and the secular world started to a process of convergence. Then I will speak about the so-called holistic value creation matrix, about those companies who aim social benefit and not only profit. And as a last point, about speaking about servant leadership, which I think is the ultimate solution for this convergence. And then finally there will be some closing remarks and a little surprise as well. And before we go into the topic itself, and although I was already introduced, but very quickly I would like to show you my background as a snapshot, just to show you that, as we heard, I am originally a businessman. I do strategic consulting, I run companies, but at the same time I'm involved in the non-profit sector as well, running charity organizations. I set up an organization, a foundation by myself. Oh, slower, yeah. It's difficult for me not to speak very fast. And as you heard, I also set up a company, a non-profit company. As for the educational background, lifelong learning is something which I also practice. So my PhD I did just 10 years ago in Italy, but geographically in Italy, but it belongs to Vatican. And last but not least, I have a very motivating and nice family with 4 children. I know already 4 grandchildren, and I think that's also very important in my life. So I try to balance my life according to these 4 dimensions, and the basis for it is my Christian faith. And that's why I would like to start with a definition of human dignity for those specifically who are in the world of work, business leaders. The church wanted to redefine or reformulate the content of human dignity. Just recently, a few years ago, when there was a book issued in different languages. This is the Hungarian one version, Vocation of the Business Leader, which is about how to deal with the companies, how to run companies, if you want to insist on the Christian social teaching. And since you know the definition of human dignity, I only want to express and quote the middle part, that each person is a who, not a what, a someone, not a something. And for us in business, this is a very challenging sentence, because all of you know the expression human resources and human resource manager, which means we normally treat our employees as resources. We have financial resources, we have natural resources, and we have human resources. But this is absolutely not right, because people are persons, each person is a who, and end in him or herself, and not a resource which should be used to arrange and achieve profit. And I think that's a core message. And therefore, if we think in this new way, based on the Catholic social teaching, and work is not just something we have to do to survive, to assure our existence, we have a very good option to see work as a field with the potential to become co-creators of God. Not a resource, not a something, not a profit-generating additional machine, but we are invited by God to become co-creators. And the last encyclical letter of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, just 3 months ago, he also expressed that work is an essential dimension of social life, for it is not only a means of earning one's daily bread, but also a personal growth, the building of healthy relationships, self-expression, and the exchange of gifts. I think this kind of approach is a much broader view than just treat people as costs in an Excel sheet, as resources to make profit with. And therefore, business leaders, international organizations like UNIAPAC, which is a worldwide organization of business leaders, started to create a study with this approach about work, about leadership, about management. It says that God calls on human persons to join in and cooperate with his work. That's why I mentioned that we are invited to become co-creators. And work is both a human and a spiritual experience. And not just spiritually in general terms, but a deeply Christian experience. We can follow Jesus Christ while he proclaims the justice of the kingdom, or while he walks the way of the cross to Golgotha, which is also sometimes our own experience. In each case, when I will use quotes, you will get the presentation, and there is the source, so you can check it on the internet afterwards as well. But if this is our call, why and what hinders us to act with this mission and vision of work? Why do we reduce our activity to a mere profit-generating approach? And again, if I go back to Pope Francis and to Fratelli Tutti, he says that in today's world, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading. If you think about our employees as resources, we don't think about them as members of our family, as our brothers and sisters. These are two different approaches. And then the Pope continues, how wonderful it would be if the growth of scientific and technological innovation could come with more equality and social inclusion. So not just focusing on the GDP, on the technology, on the newest iPhone and so on, but to think about the social inclusion, again thinking in mankind as one family, as one unity. Market is very important, but the freedom of the market was not sufficient to keep everything secure. This is what we realized on the crisis in the 2008-2009 period, and also these days where we are hit by the COVID virus. As the Pope summarized, we are prisoners of a virtual reality, and we lost the taste and flavor of the truly real. We are much more heavily involved in the virtual world and much less on the physical level, having this kind of contact with each other. And the crisis is always a good moment to think about changes. And again, the Pope sadly summarizes that we had this chance, for example, in 2007-2008, but the response to the crisis did not include rethinking the outdated criteria which continue to rule the world. This is the general term, this is the general approach, this is the mainstream, but it's not the only one, and that's why we are here. If we think about the two approaches, we can think about the for-profit world in a very simple way and the non-profit world. These are two different worlds with two different goals, one aiming to profit, the other one driven by altruism, and they are completely separated, or they have been completely separated, which is again not an ideal situation. But it was realized that this is not good, that having two different worlds on the one globe, and therefore there is a chance to do something more which integrates the best parts of both worlds and brings the human flourishing onto a higher level by not alone aiming to maximize profit and not aiming to minimize poverty or other bad problems, but to optimize the needs of the entire society and to do the activities within the economy with having in mind that we are here to do something good for the whole society. This is called for-benefit model and models, and it relies on the two former groups, and each of them had to develop own ideas based on their own principles to come to this solution. Here you can see two pillars from the for-profit world, the so-called CSV, and I will immediately speak about it, and from the non-profit world, the CIV, which again I will describe very soon. CSV, which was one of the pillars, is creating shared value. It's a concept which was developed in 2011 by Michael Porter, who is the famous guru of marketing and management, a very well-known Harvard professor, who realized that everything, partly he himself developed in the past several decades, about how to increase profit, how to make business, how to run a capitalist company, reached its border, and that's why he developed a new idea, creating shared value. Creating shared value means that we rethink about the whole procedure, about the whole value chain of doing business, starting with the procurement and development up to the selling and after-sales activities. And we not only rely on the innovations, we not only aim growth for the company, but we always have a third aim, societal profit. All the activities every day should have a positive impact on the society. That's much more than, for example, doing everything according to the old system, and once a year, for one day, we do something good. the difference is now they want to think about the daily activities as something which has a societal benefit advantage for the whole society. That's a major breakthrough. On the other hand, it still lacks the spiritual value and the Spirit and the Holy Spirit as well. That's our part to fit it into this picture, and this is what Pope Benedict in 2009 in his encyclical letter Caritas in Veritate, which is the second pillar of the four benefit concept in my view, not only spoke about his suggestions and ideas of general terms, but also about those which are for the businessmen, for those who are in the world of economy. First of all, he declared that we have to focus on the whole man and every man. Not just one aspect, a resource which has hands, for example, or can think and innovate something, but we think in the whole man. If, for example, if we think about our employees. On the other hand, we think in every man, because every person in the world, all the 8 billion by now, are our brothers and sisters for whom we have to take some responsibility, as it is said in the fourth point, responsibility on the part of everyone with regard to everyone. When he speaks about, and we as business leaders usually speak about how to make decisions and that there are certain rules for it, we have to be aware, which is in this encyclical letter as well, that every economic decision has a moral consequence. It cannot be that I am very moral before and after the working hours, and only on Sundays, for example. If I have integrity, if I am a Christian, I have to know that every economic decision I do as a leader has a moral consequence. As I said, one of the pillars was issued in 2009, the other one, CSV, in 2011. Then in 2013, this kind of a synthesis happened. The leader, the president of World Bank, which World Bank represents the business world, personally visited the Pope. By that time, it was already Francis, and asked for a cooperation against poverty across the globe. He said, and these quotes are from the president of World Bank and not from the Vatican side, Pope Francis and I agree on the urgent and moral imperative to lessen the suffering of over 1 billion people and to end the scandal of poverty. So the president of World Bank declared that poverty on the globe is a scandal, and it's a task, and it's a challenge where the leaders, both of the economic world and of the spiritual world, have to join their forces so we can reduce it, and for the bottom 40%, we, especially in the developing countries, to eliminate poverty in the coming years. Again, if we jump 2 years, in 2015, the UN defined a universal portfolio of goals in order to support sustainability, which includes relevant aspects of the work. Number 1, no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality of life, decent work, equal opportunities, and so on. If you go through the 16 plus the 17th, which is the cooperation and integration, you can see that these goals are again based on the approach that work is not only to survive existentially or to generate profits, but to support the whole society. And 1 year later, in 2016, in December, many of us altogether 450 Christian business leaders gathered together in Vatican from close to 50 countries to discuss how business leaders can become agents of economic and social inclusion. Because we realize that we cannot just look and watch and hope that World Bank and the church and others and the states will do something. It's our task as well to act as agents of economic and social inclusion. The story continues. Now, just a month ago, on the World Economic Forum's 50th meeting or 51st meeting after 50 years, it was the first time that even the Pope was invited and had a chance through Cardinal Turkson to send his message to all the key people of the World Economic Forum, which includes the major prime ministers, presidents, leaders of the biggest companies and so on, where again the Pope reminded all the participants that we are all members of the one human family. And we have a moral obligation to care for one another. The message is the same what we could read in the Caritas in Veritate encyclical letter, but now it's spread all over the world. Maybe it's even in some way much more interesting that the founder of World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, introduced also an idea which he called the Great Reset. And he said, we need a change of mindset, moving from short-term to long-term thinking, moving from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder responsibility. This is again an idea we in the church, in the Christian business community often stated, but now the founder and president of the World Economic Forum brought this idea to the whole audience, which is the whole political and economic world. And he already announced that 60 companies declared that they join these metrics, and that there will be a separate meeting in August in Singapore. And by that time, the goal is to achieve 200 companies signing up for this approach. I think this is really something which shows the convergence of the ideas of the church and the thoughts of the economic and business world. Business ethics is a term which is relatively new. It only has a 50-year history, while business itself has more than 1,000-year history. And just out of curiosity, I checked on the internet and I found out that the oldest business which still exists, uninterrupted, is in Japan, and it started in 705. 1,300 years ago, and still in operation. And the second, or the oldest in Europe, is in Austria. It's a restaurant which started in 803 within a monastery, which existed already for 100 years at that time, which proves how close spirituality and business can be, or could be already 1,300 or 1,200 years ago. If we speak about business and we have to think about business ethics should again impact every step and every phase of the value chain. Business ethics should not only be a theory or a course at the universities, it should be put into practice as well. And it should have a normative approach. There should be a set of ideas how to do it and how to follow it. And that's why business ethics, law, and moral should be integrated and should become one unity. The relation of of these three things, human dignity, business ethics, and common good, if we integrate them, we can see that they are fully interdependent. For example, business ethics is justified because we accept human dignity as a basis. If we accept human dignity as a basis, then we have to behave ethically toward each other. And if we follow the practice business ethics, this is essential to support the common good, because again, the common good means that we have the goal to satisfy the needs of everybody and not just of certain persons or certain groups. And if we accept a common good as a common goal, then its ultimate goal is again the human flourishing, which is based and linked to human dignity. And we can do it vice versa. So it means these three terms and this triangle is very important, and we have to focus on all of the three. This triangle-based corporate world focuses on the stakeholder approach instead of the shareholder focus only. If we look and check the management theory, we can see that across the time, in the past few decades, in the 70s, in the 1970s, the owner was put in the center. The neoliberal approach said that the owner is the most important and the only important player. Later on, there was the idea, okay, we have to involve the managers as well. Then also the customers, because they pay us, so we need them. In today's knowledge economy, we need motivation and brain of all the employees, so let's bring them also into our boat. The creditors, the state, the microenvironment. In the past few decades, we started to think about the next generation as well, pollution, environment, and what is new for many, to think also about those who are disadvantaged in different forms, and to think about them as well, because this is the consequence if you think about human dignity, if you think about every people's need, and we think about being one human family. Many people say this is an utopia, it's just a desire, it's not valid, it cannot be practiced. My view is different, because I think it depends again how we think anthropologically about man. Do we think about man like other animals or robots, or we compare, this is better to do by a robot, this is better to do by somebody, a person? That was the first approach. The second was to think about people as Homo sapiens, thinking people with their intellectual life. And the third level is to think about the spiritual life as well. And in our world, the world of economy and business, we accepted the second level very fast, because we needed for the knowledge industry and knowledge economy the intellectual life. But the mainstream still hesitates to acknowledge the third level. And of course, if we don't accept the third level, then a stakeholder approach and thinking also for the need of disadvantaged is really a utopia. However, if we combine the previous list of all the stakeholders and integrate them with the three layers of the person and put it into this kind of matrix, we end up with something which I call the holistic stakeholder value matrix. Holistic because it takes consideration of all the stakeholders and all the layers, and the value, not just meaning profit and dollar terms, but value in all the boxes of this matrix. Now, as a business leader, owner and business leader, we can think only in one box, the material, financial value creation of the shareholder. Excuse me, it was not Nem sikerült a váltás most. A slide-om. Okay, now it's okay. Now we have the same. Yeah. So if we only focus on one box, which is the material aspect of the shareholder, which is the neoliberal approach saying that we are here and we work only to generate profit, dividend, value creation in financial terms and for the owner. An extreme opposite are all the charity activities where we focus on the poor, maybe in each level of them or each layer or just a few of them. And I think the real corporate responsibility would mean to think in all these boxes. All the stakeholders and all the three layers. Of course, this is a real challenge to act and to make decisions with 21 7x3 goals, which sometimes have conflicts with each other. It's much more difficult than just to think about how to make more and more profit. But this is what makes us human. This is what makes us co-creators of God. And this is what makes us business leaders different from a software which compares different options and figures out which is generates the highest profit. So I think if I speak about leaders, I speak about not just about those who run a big company. I also speak about those who have maybe two colleagues in a project and who is responsible for this project. And again, if you in this, and it can be even with a goal, not even for aiming profit and money, but maybe something very, very useful. But if you only think on this goal and you don't consider all the stakeholders and all these layers, it's a materialistic approach, and it's not the complexity that we are called by God. So we spoke about human dignity, we spoke about business ethics, we spoke about common good. I think if we really acknowledge them and put them as goals, we have to think in this whole complexity of the holistic stakeholder value matrix. The idea of having not just the extremes, like a traditional for-profit enterprise on one end, and to have a traditional charity non-profit organization on the other end, by now there are a lot of formulations in between. And we can segment them according to their aim, which is always how they differentiate and how they relate between profit focus and impact focus. Besides the traditional for-profit enterprises, we have companies who really focus in addition on corporate social responsibility. I also mentioned the creating shared value concept, which also fits into this picture. There are mission and purpose-driven enterprises, which say we set up this company because we want to support clean technology or hospitals or develop a new medicine against COVID or whatever. We have to make profit because this is why we get capital, but our aim is equally important to provide solutions for the society. We have social enterprises and we have enterprising non-profit companies. So there is a wide variety and not just two options. And interestingly, the value of investment with social impacts, which means practically the left side of these options, by now has reached 23,000 billion US dollars worldwide, which is a fraction of the total amount which is invested, but still a very big amount. So it means it's not just the idea of some utopian people. There are organizations, family office, rich people, much less rich people who invest a part of their wealth into companies where more and more, instead of the profit focus, the impact focus becomes more and more important, which is a promising trend, especially since it's a growing number. This number is based on a study made by BCG in 2018. I'm sure, and I read the figures, that it's increasing on every continent by now. The other good message is that it's not just that some old people suddenly realize they should do something good for the society and are ready to invest in something which doesn't maximize its profit but creates societal value. But the young generation, the so-called Generation Y, those who were born after 1981, wants to choose products, services, the place they work, the activities they do, much more linked to societal development than linked to pure money, pure profit, pure size of car, things like that. The current trend of sharing economy, where people share their cars, flats, everything they have, is already a sign and a proof of it. We don't want to earn, the young generation doesn't want to earn, to own everything. They want to use, and they want to use in a way which does not harm the environment, which makes the use and leverages the use of the resources on an efficient way, and not focusing only on pure maximization of profit. So we spoke about different versions of companies, and if you put them on a chart where the vertical axis is about the value for the society, and the horizontal axis is how far and how deep they are oriented towards the common good, then we can see that the neoliberal approach is not really a common good oriented approach. It provides certain value for the society, it provides jobs, it generates taxes and so on, but that's all. If we involve corporate social responsibility, that's a step forward. If we continue with the creating shared value concept which I mentioned, it's a step further, and we can go further to the for benefit and even for the for others form. Here on the left-hand side, I showed that legally each of them are correct, even the neoliberal one. They follow the rules, the law, they pay the taxes and so on. Some of them, like the CSR and the CSV one, in addition to being legally correct, are even ethically correct. And if somebody is ready and able and willing to go further, it can also, in addition, to become altruistic. And that's why the Church, as it states in the Caritas in Veritate encyclical letter, can say that in the recent decades, a broad intermediate area has emerged between the two types, for-profit and non-profit enterprise. One, which does not exclude profit, but instead considers it a means for achieving human and social ends. And those who start a company, those who run a department or run a company, have in limited way, but have the chance to choose what kind of companies they lead and how they lead the companies. And to give you my own example as a kind of testimony, 900 years ago, a Jewish philosopher and rabbi, Maimonides, made his thoughts and declared his thoughts about donations and the ethical values of different kinds of donations. I don't want to go through all the levels. What was interesting and what struck me was that at the end of the day he came to the conclusion that the best thing is if we ensure a job to the ones who are in need, so that there's no donation needed anymore. And the same practically was said by Pope Francis in Laudato Si 5-6 years ago in 2015, where he said that helping the poor financially must always be a provisional solution in the face of pressing needs. So if somebody is in need, we have to help. But the broader objective should always be to allow them a dignified life through work. And this is why I set up a company and started a company in the year of 2000 with the single purpose to create and ensure jobs for those who otherwise couldn't have a job because they are handicapped, because they have certain other disadvantaged situations. So this company by now is 20-year-old. As we heard, we have more than 100 employees. Majority of them are handicapped, and practically all of them are disadvantaged. In addition, we have about 50 to 100 part-time workers. And our aim is to, exactly what I showed, not to give donation, which doesn't solve their problem and doesn't serve their human dignity, but to let them work under certain conditions with our help. So for example, our company collects them every morning by cars and takes them home and so on. So we give the support, but towards the market, we are a company like every other. We do services, we work in logistics centers and so on. Maybe we need more time, more people, and therefore we create less profit. But the company is not here for profit, especially not because I set up this company in a legal form which does not allow legally any kind of dividend payment to the owner. So I wanted to show and prove that it makes sense in a broader view to create a company and to invest into a company money and time, although I will never get back anything of it. But if I think about this company, if I meet them, I think it's much more important than what I do in my rest and in the majority of my time as a strategic consultant supporting big companies who are profit-making anyway, even without my support. So I brought this example to let you know that it's not the only one. Of course, there are many others. But since I have the chance now to share my view with you, I thought it's a good idea to let you know that even here in Hungary, even not by the richest people of the world, somebody like me who has a company, as my strategic consulting company had at the top, we were maybe 10 or 15. My non-profit company has more than 100 employees, so it's not a side effect, it's not something, a playground. It's very important for my life. So I spoke about the story and the convergence about between the secular world and the church view, Catholic social teaching, and I see that gradually the convergence happens. Words, terms, thoughts like personalism, friendship, happiness, common good, and human flourishing, which originally were much more often used in the Catholic social teaching than in the language of leaders, management, and business, now appear and get practiced. At the beginning, I told you that the term human resource management, human resource, is in itself already a very, very disturbing terminology. We always speak about persons, and if we speak about persons, that means we follow the approach which was developed by Maritain, a French philosopher, of personalism, which means we put the person into the middle. And if we follow this approach, then personalism requires different kind of leaders than the leaders we saw in the neoliberal mainstream world. Because, as Watson writes, personalism requires servant leaders with a transforming vision who affirm their followers' human dignity. The book I cited, or the article I cited, has the title Personalism and Moral Leadership, the servant leader with a transforming vision. This person who wrote this article and book is not a priest, not a monk. I don't even know whether he's a churchman or not. He has a pure academic, with his pure academic approach, he came to the conclusion that if we put the person into the middle, and then we rely from an anthropological point of view on personalism, that means that we have to lead people according to a servant leadership approach, where the leader is not the king, not somebody who should be served, but the one who serves the rest of the team to achieve the results. And this is why words of the business world like efficiency can now get into the context of solidarity, economy and sociality no more appear as antithetical but complementary elements. And as a summary, I think, is the last sentence: the common good is both a condition for and the result of the happiness. So serving the common good is not something we make us victims and we suffer from it. It's the cause and the consequence of happiness. And even business leaders would like to become happy. And I don't think it's a sin. Especially the words spirituality and love. Earlier you couldn't find any book, academic book, or any conference dealing with such words. Recently there are conferences, there are books, there are courses, there are academic groups who focus on these in the context of business. For example, Chris Lowney, who used to be a Jesuit monk candidate for 7 years, after 7 years he left the Jesuits and entered the business world and became a very famous vice president, by the way, in Singapore, of one of the biggest investment banks, which he left in the early 2000s when before the whole crisis and the toxic papers and so on showed up, because he realized that it's not anymore his world. He wrote 2 books, at least I know about 2 of them, and this one is called Heroic Leadership, Best Practices from a 450-year-old company that changed the world. He speaks about the Jesuits. And he uses in this book business terms showing the story and the approach of the Jesuits about Ignatius. And he speaks about love-driven leadership. And he says that love-driven leadership is the vision to see each person's talent, potential, and dignity. Love-driven leadership is the courage, passion, and commitment to unlock this potential, which the result in loyalty and mutual support that energize and unite teams. And he learned it from the Jesuits, and he practiced it in his professional career. I don't know too much about this company, which is called Lovebox in the States, and about his owner and leaders. But this quote shows and proves that they are strongly following their faith when they say vision comes from God through inspiration. Mission is his vision grasped by the mind. And when mission descends into the heart, it becomes values. And when we practice these values, it becomes culture. This is also a statement which says, if we set up a company, if we lead a company, if we are in the world of work, we can still think about our faith. We can and should act as Christians in this context as well. I said that servant leadership is the answer. The servant leadership is what should be followed if we want to think in love-based management. Here is a list about what it means. A few points regarding the character, what kind of person is the leader, how should be his personal orientation, the task orientation, and process orientation. I want to only choose and focus on items like servanthood. So the leader is the servant. Does it ring the bell of Jesus? This is what he told us 2,000 years ago, not just told, but even practiced it. Now, after 2,000 years, we realize it's a great idea. Caring for others, developing others. So this kind, and I could go through the whole list. Sorry, again, the slide is not the same than what I have.
I think your machine slows down.
Na, nálam megy? Ott nem. Yeah, now it's okay. Somehow, not always it's not always synchronized. That's not a problem. That's just a challenge. Much lower than running a company. And as I said, when I speak about leaders, managers, I not speak about the top guy of a 300,000 employee company. I also speak about, we are here in one room, somebody has to take care about the IT background with some colleagues, and so on. Every project, on every level, involves somebody who has to make decisions, who runs the project, and these ideas are for all of them. If we speak about the aspects of work and human dignity-based work, we can put lists, bullet points here in this form about dignity in work and dignity at work. Dignity in work means the level of autonomy, which is partly related to job satisfaction, to have a meaningful work, not as a resource, but as a person, respect, and further development, learning and other kind of development. On the other hand, dignity at work includes well-being, I will come back to it later, just reward, salary, voice, which means having an impact on the decisions, security, and equal opportunity. And since you will have a workshop after this meeting, I would suggest to think about and maybe even share and discuss about your memories and experiences, about your previous experiences in your life, about situations where you as a subordinate, as an employee, as a member of a team, could experience that it was realized, this kind of approach was realized, and what you felt and how it happened. And on the other hand, those when it was missed and you lacked this kind of implementation. And maybe more importantly, let's remind ourselves and let's think about how from now on we would like to do things and manage things differently with this kind of approach. If we are the boss, we are the project leader, we are the team leader. Maybe that's a good idea to bridge the gap between theory and the daily practice. I spoke here about well-being, and well-being is practically a secular term, and caring maybe as well. For the term we use at the church or at the Catholic social teaching, and we formulate it as integral human development, which means we as persons have different needs, and we, the whole man and every man, should develop and flourish. But as you can see, this is from the homepage of a public university in the United States, not even a Christian one, which speaks about 9 dimensions of wellness. Of course, it includes the physical and financial and so on, But interestingly enough, in the middle, not just among the 9, but in the middle, they put the spiritual well-being. So that means we are not just allowed to speak about such issues among ourselves in this small circle, but it's something which now is part of the public domain. And it's acknowledged by many. Not by everybody, but by many. And if we want to go into the details, and maybe it's for a later stage, I don't want to, of course, to read all these details, but here you can see the comparison of the traditional leadership approach, which is based on commands and subordinates, and what it means, the same approach, if you follow the servant leadership approach. And I think it makes sense to go through all these comparisons and to think about how and what makes the difference. And again, it's management theory, it's an official academic quote, it's not a priest's speech, it's something which now is part of the public management science academic theory, and hopefully also soon and partly practice of the leaders. So there is a difference in the way we approach our decisions. Traditionally, we think in ourselves, in me. We think what is good now, short-term thinking, and what is good financially. This is the typical, this is the mainstream, this is what universities teach, this is what we can see. But why and who and what hinders us? Why couldn't we think and decide on a much more holistic approach basis, which means instead of what is good for me, to think about what serves the common good, instead of the short-term thinking now, to think in the long run, and thinking in the only aspect of what is good financially, taking into consideration all aspects of life, with all this wellness and all these traits of human persons. This latter is not yet the typical approach, but it can be, and for many it is. And if we want to follow the Catholic social teaching, this is our way of thinking. So I think, I hope at least I could show and prove you that the Christian system provides a consistent set of answers to the key questions, whether it's about the private life or it's about the professional life. And me, as a strategic consultant, when I start a project with a company, the first thing we always do is to answer the question regarding the company: what is the mission of the company? What is the vision of the company, and what should be the strategy to achieve this vision and fulfill the mission? Now, I tried to summarize it here for man and its private life, and therefore, and as a consequence, based on it for the whole economy. If we think about the mission, I think the mission of all of us is to become similar to God. Similar meaning to try to get, to think, to view the situation, the people, and the whole world as much as possible with the view and eyes of God. Which means in the economy, love-based management, implementation of love in the business, in the management, in the activities, across the value chain, in the daily life. Our vision, our view, as a person, as a human being, is to get integrated into the Holy Trinity. Part of becoming part of God. The whole life of ours is a preparation for it. And the Holy Trinity, on a very limited way, and not forever, but it's our effort to do it, to achieve a kind of a demo version of heaven in a company, in our working environment. It's challenging, but it's manageable sometimes. We can achieve it. And the strategy is for us as persons to think instead of homo economicus in homo trinitarius. And in the economy it also means not to be alone, but to think in a network or even in a communion of firms which are also based on spiritual values. So as I said, this is a consistent set of approach, which is not the same what we can see in the outside world every day. Many say it's a utopia, it's idealistic, it's not something we should do. There is a way to decide, there is a choice for everybody. And as I mentioned to you at the beginning, I have a little surprise for you about this choice and decision, a short video to finish my presentation with it, which is about the choice for your private life and choice for your life in the world of work. So let's start with this short video. Akkor most megy a hang, ugye?
Your efforts are in vain. Do not think that life has a purpose for you. Always be aware that you are alone, that you cannot rely on anyone, and that love is nothing but an illusion. No one will be proud of you. It's not true that life is worth living, and you can never be truly happy. Your friends will betray you. They lied when they told you that time heals all wounds. Take comfort from the fact that millions of people on earth, despite all the suffering, believe in precisely this. Turning bad into good, you are incapable of. Do not believe that to reverse your own fate, you have a choice. You have a choice. You have a choice to reverse your own fate. Do not believe that you are incapable of turning bad into good. Believe in precisely this. Despite all the suffering, millions of people on earth take comfort from the fact that time heals all wounds. They lied when they told you that your friends will betray you and you can never be truly happy. Life is worth living. It's not true that no one will be proud of you and that love is nothing but an illusion, that you cannot rely on anyone, that you are alone. Always be aware that life has a purpose for you. Do not think your efforts are in vain.
So we thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, because probably we heard many new and inspirational quotes, and which are very practical because he is practicing it, so it's not just theory.